There is something quietly revolutionary about the morning. Before the emails arrive and the phone starts buzzing and the world begins pulling at you from every direction, there is a window of time that belongs entirely to you. Most people sleepwalk through it. They hit snooze 3 times, scroll through their phone in bed, stumble to the coffee machine, and wonder why they feel behind before the day has even started. But there is a small group of people who treat that morning window differently, not because they are more disciplined or more motivated or born with some special gene that makes early rising easy, but because they know something that most people were never taught. They know that what you do in the first 60 to 90 minutes after you wake up sets the biochemical, neurological, and psychological tone for everything that follows. And the doctors and researchers who study human health and performance for a living have been trying to tell us this for years. Most of us just were not listening. Today, we are going to change that, because what the medical and scientific community has quietly agreed upon about morning habits is genuinely life-changing, and almost none of it requires expensive supplements, or a 4 a.m. alarm, or the kind of iron willpower that most of us simply do not have before breakfast. It requires understanding. And once you understand why these habits matter at a biological level, doing them stops feeling like discipline and starts feeling like self-respect. Let us start with the very first moment. The moment your eyes open. Before you reach for your phone. Before you check the time, before you do anything at all, there is something happening in your body that most people completely ignore. Your cortisol levels are naturally spiking. This is called the cortisol awakening response, and it is one of the most important hormonal events of your entire day. Cortisol, which most people associate with stress, is actually your body's primary wake-up signal. It peaks in the first 30 to 45 minutes after waking. And this peak is your body essentially charging its own battery. It is sharpening your focus, mobilizing your energy stores, preparing your immune system, and getting your brain ready to process information. Doctors and endocrinologists have been studying this response for decades, and what they have found is striking. People who have a strong, healthy cortisol awakening response tend to have better mental clarity, better mood regulation, stronger immune function, and better cardiovascular health throughout the day. People who disrupt this response by immediately flooding their nervous system with the stress of social media, news, or emails the second they wake up essentially short-circuit one of their body's most powerful natural systems. You are not just scrolling Instagram when you pick up your phone in the first 5 minutes of waking. You are interrupting a hormonal process that your body has spent the entire night preparing for. Doctors wish you would just let it happen. So what should you do instead of reaching for your phone? The answer is almost embarrassingly simple. Lie still for a moment. Breathe. Let your body complete its natural awakening process. Some physicians recommend what they call a physiological sigh, which is a double inhale through the nose, followed by a long, slow exhale through the mouth. This specific breathing pattern has been shown in research at Stanford University to be the fastest way to reduce physiological arousal and activate the parasympathetic nervous system. You are not meditating. You are not doing yoga. You are doing one breath, and it takes about 4 seconds, and it tells your nervous system that you are safe and that the day ahead does not need to begin in a state of emergency. That single habit, practiced every morning before anything else, can meaningfully shift your baseline stress response for the entire day. Now let us talk about light. Natural light in the morning is one of the most powerful and most overlooked health tools that exists, and it costs absolutely nothing. When natural light enters your eyes in the morning, it triggers a cascade of neurological events that affect your mood, your energy, your metabolism, and, critically, your sleep quality that night. The science here is rock solid. Light exposure in the morning suppresses melatonin, the sleep hormone, and signals your suprachiasmatic nucleus, the master clock in your brain, to start its 24-hour countdown. When that clock is properly set by morning light, everything downstream runs better. Your digestion times itself correctly. Your hormones release at the right moments. Your body temperature follows its proper rhythm. Your brain produces the neurotransmitters it needs at the times you actually need them. Dr. Andrew Huberman, a neuroscientist at Stanford whose work on circadian biology has reached millions of people, recommends getting outside within the first 30 minutes of waking and exposing your eyes to natural light for at least 5 to 10 minutes, and up to 20 to 30 minutes on overcast days when the light is weaker. He is not alone in this recommendation. Sleep researchers, ophthalmologists, psychiatrists, and endocrinologists all point to morning light as one of the most effective and underutilized interventions available for mood disorders, metabolic issues, and sleep problems. And yet the vast majority of people spend their entire morning indoors under artificial lighting that is completely inadequate for triggering these biological processes. Getting outside in the morning, even just to stand in your garden or on your balcony or to walk to the end of your street, is one of the simplest and most medically sound things you can do for your long-term health. Let us move to water, because this is where the gap between what doctors know and what most people do is almost comically wide. After 6 to 8 hours of sleep, your body is dehydrated. Not severely, not dangerously, but meaningfully. You have been breathing, perspiring, and metabolizing all night without taking in any fluids, and every single biochemical process in your body, from your ability to think clearly to your digestion, to your kidney function, to your mood, is affected by your hydration status. Drinking water first thing in the morning before coffee, before food, before anything else, is something that physicians across virtually every specialty recommend. Not because it is trendy or because wellness influencers have made it popular, but because the physiology is unambiguous. Your brain is approximately 75% water. A drop in hydration of even 1 to 2% has been shown in multiple studies to impair cognitive performance, reduce short-term memory, slow reaction time, and increase the perception of effort during physical tasks. In other words, the foggy, sluggish, slightly irritable way that many people feel in the morning is not just tiredness, it is dehydration, and it is fixable within minutes with something that comes out of your tap for free. Doctors recommend starting with 400 to 600 milliliters of water, roughly 1 to 2 glasses, before consuming anything else. Some physicians add a small pinch of sea salt and a squeeze of lemon to support electrolyte balance and gentle liver stimulation. But even plain water makes a dramatic difference. The coffee can wait 10 minutes. Your brain and your body will thank you for it. Speaking of coffee, let us address the habit that almost everyone has and almost everyone is doing at the wrong time. The science on caffeine and cortisol timing has been clear for years, but almost nobody outside of medical and research circles knows about it. Here is the issue. Caffeine works primarily by blocking adenosine receptors in your brain. Adenosine is a chemical that builds up throughout the day and makes you feel tired. When caffeine blocks those receptors, the tiredness signal cannot get through and you feel alert. But here's the critical part. In the first 90 minutes after waking, your cortisol is naturally elevated and doing the same job that caffeine would do. It is making you alert and energized through its own biological mechanism. When you drink coffee during this window, the caffeine is largely redundant because the cortisol is already handling alertness, but it is worse than just redundant. The combination of high cortisol and caffeine together is thought to blunt the effectiveness of caffeine over time, meaning your body builds tolerance faster, meaning you need more coffee to get the same effect, meaning you end up in the classic cycle of caffeine dependency that leaves millions of people unable to function in the morning without their fix. Neuroscientists and sleep researchers recommend waiting 90 minutes to 2 hours after waking before having your first coffee. This allows your cortisol to peak and begin declining naturally, at which point caffeine steps in and extends your alertness rather than fighting your own biology. For people who try this, the reports are remarkably consistent. The coffee hits harder, lasts longer, and the afternoon crash is significantly reduced. It feels counterintuitive. It feels almost impossible if you are a committed coffee first thing person. But the physiology makes the case clearly, and doctors who specialize in sleep and metabolic health have been making this recommendation for years. Now let us talk about movement, because this is one of the areas where the medical consensus is both clearest and most ignored. Exercise at any time of day is beneficial. The research on this is not in dispute. But morning movement has specific and additional benefits that exercise at other times of the day simply does not provide. When you move your body in the morning, you are doing several things simultaneously. You are raising your core body temperature, which increases alertness and cognitive performance. You are triggering the release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, sometimes called miracle grow for the brain, which promotes the growth of new neural connections and has been associated with protection against depression, anxiety, and cognitive decline. You are burning through residual stress hormones that may have accumulated overnight. You are stabilizing your blood sugar, which has enormous downstream effects on your mood, your cravings, and your energy levels throughout the day. And you are completing what physicians often call a keystone habit, a behavior that tends to organize other healthy behaviors around it. People who exercise in the morning are statistically more likely to make better food choices, drink more water, sleep better, and maintain their exercise habit long-term compared to people who exercise at other times. The doctors who study habit, formation, and behavior change have noted this pattern consistently. Morning exercise is not just exercise. It is a behavioral anchor that holds the rest of your day in place. And it does not have to be a 45-minute gym session. Research shows that even 10 to 15 minutes of brisk walking, body weight movement, or gentle stretching produces measurable neurological and hormonal benefits. The threshold for meaningful morning movement is far lower than most people assume. Let us move to food, because the breakfast question is one that generates enormous confusion and enormous conflict. And the medical community has actually arrived at a more nuanced and interesting position than the simple, eat breakfast, it is the most important meal of the day message that most of us grew up hearing. The truth is that the timing and composition of your first meal matters far more than simply whether or not you eat breakfast. Here is what the research consistently shows. Eating a breakfast that is high in refined carbohydrates and sugar, the classic cereal, toast, and orange juice combination, causes a rapid spike in blood glucose, followed by an equally rapid crash, which leaves you hungry, foggy, and craving more sugar by mid-morning. This blood sugar roller coaster is one of the primary drivers of energy fluctuation, mood instability, and poor focus throughout the day. Physicians and endocrinologists recommend a first meal that is anchored by protein and healthy fats, with complex carbohydrates playing a supporting rather than starring role. Eggs, Greek yogurt, nuts, avocado, lean meat. These are the foods that produce a slow, stable release of energy that supports sustained cognitive performance and appetite regulation. Some doctors, particularly those who specialize in metabolic health, also advocate for a slightly delayed first meal, allowing the body's natural fat-burning processes that operate during sleep to continue for a little longer before food intake interrupts them. This is not about skipping breakfast dramatically. It is about understanding that your body is already doing something useful in that first hour after waking, and that food is not always the most urgent addition to the equation. There is another morning habit that doctors consider essential and that almost never makes it into mainstream wellness conversations, and that is deliberate mental preparation for the day. Not in a vague motivational sense, but in a specific cognitive sense. Neuroscientists who study prefrontal cortex function have found that the brain is in a particularly receptive and plastic state in the first hour after waking. The theta brainwave, state that characterizes the transition from sleep to full wakefulness, makes the mind unusually open to suggestion, intention, and pattern setting. What this means practically is that what you think about and focus on in that first hour has a disproportionate influence on the neural pathways that get activated throughout the rest of the day. Psychiatrists and cognitive behavioral therapists have long recommended some form of morning mental practice, whether that is journaling, setting clear intentions for the day, reviewing personal goals, or simply sitting quietly and thinking deliberately about what matters most. This is not mysticism. It is applied neuroscience. The mind you bring to the first hour of your day is the mind that shapes every subsequent decision, interaction, and response. People who use that first hour intentionally, who decide consciously what they are thinking about rather than letting the algorithm decide for them, report consistently higher levels of focus, emotional regulation, and a sense of purpose and direction throughout the day. Cold water exposure in the morning is something that has moved from the fringes of wellness culture into serious medical consideration over the past decade, and the research supporting it is more robust than many people realize. Cold shower, even just the last 30 to 60 seconds of your regular shower turned to cold, triggers a significant release of norepinephrine in the brain, with some studies showing increases of up to 300%. Norepinephrine is a neurotransmitter associated with focus, energy, mood elevation, and pain reduction. It is also one of the primary neurochemicals implicated in the treatment of depression. Cold water exposure also activates the sympathetic nervous system in a controlled way, which researchers believe trains the body's stress response system to be more resilient over time, meaning that regular cold exposure may actually reduce your baseline anxiety and improve your ability to handle stress in other contexts. Doctors are careful to note that cold exposure is not appropriate for everyone, particularly people with cardiovascular conditions, and that the evidence, while compelling, is still developing. But for healthy individuals, a brief cold water exposure in the morning is one of the most biologically potent habits available, and it costs nothing beyond the minor discomfort of about 60 seconds of cold water. Let us spend a moment on what might be the most underestimated morning habit of all, which is protecting the first part of your morning from other people's agendas. This sounds less clinical than the other habits we have discussed, but the psychological and neurological case for it is strong. Every notification, every email, every news headline, every text message you receive is someone else's priority entering your consciousness. When you begin your day by immediately consuming other people's needs, problems, opinions, and demands, you begin the day in a reactive state rather than a proactive one. Psychologists who study attention and cognitive load have found that decision fatigue, the degradation of decision-making quality that happens as the day progresses, starts earlier and accumulates faster in people who begin their day with high cognitive load activities like email processing and social media scrolling. The doctors and researchers who study peak performance consistently recommend a morning buffer, a period of time before you engage with external demands, during which you move, hydrate, get light exposure, eat intentionally, and set your own agenda for the day. Even 30 minutes of protected morning time, where your phone is face down and notifications are off, can produce measurable improvements in the quality of your thinking and the sense of control you feel over your own life. This is perhaps the habit that requires the most courage because it means telling the world to wait. And we have all been conditioned to believe that immediate responsiveness is a virtue. It is not. It is a trap. And the physicians who study human performance and mental health will tell you clearly that the most effective and mentally healthy people they encounter are almost universally people who protect their mornings with intention. There is one more habit that doctors consistently point to as foundational and transformative, and it is one that bridges the physical and the psychological in a way that is deeply human. It is gratitude. Not as a spiritual practice, though it can be that, but as a neurological intervention. Research in positive psychology and neuroscience has shown that deliberately identifying things you are grateful for in the morning activates the medial prefrontal cortex and triggers the release of dopamine and serotonin, the brain's primary mood-regulating neurotransmitters. This is not a small effect. Studies have found that a regular gratitude practice produces measurable changes in brain structure over time, literally rewiring the neural pathways associated with negativity bias and threat detection toward patterns of positive anticipation and reward. Psychiatrists who treat anxiety and depression have incorporated gratitude practices into clinical treatment plans because the neurological evidence supports it. You do not need a journal, though writing it down amplifies the effect. You do not need to list 10 things. You do not need to perform happiness you do not feel. 3 specific, genuine things that you are grateful for, thought about slowly and deliberately for just a few minutes each morning, is enough to shift your neurological baseline in ways that accumulate over weeks and months into something that looks remarkably like a different quality of life. What all of these habits share is a common underlying principle, and it is the principle that your morning is not a passive experience that happens to you, but an active biological and psychological process that you can shape. The doctors and researchers who study human health at the highest level are not describing complicated interventions or expensive treatments when they talk about morning habits. They are describing the intelligent use of what your body is already trying to do. Your cortisol is already trying to wake you up. Your circadian clock is already trying to set itself. Your brain is already trying to clear adenos and become alert. Your stress response system is already trying to calibrate itself for the day ahead. All of these habits do is support those processes rather than working against them. The gap between what the medical and scientific community knows about mornings and what most people actually do with their mornings is one of the most significant and preventable sources of human suffering and underperformance in the modern world. We have built a culture that treats the morning as an obstacle to be survived on the way to the real day. But the doctors know better. The morning is not the obstacle. The morning is the foundation. And foundations, as anyone who has ever watched a building collapse will tell you, are worth getting right. Start with one of these habits tomorrow. Just one. Pick the one that resonates most and do it consistently for 2 weeks before adding another. Because the research on habit formation is equally clear that stacking too many new behaviors at once almost always leads to failure, while one anchored habit, practiced until it is automatic, becomes the root from which all the others can grow. You do not need to transform your morning overnight. You just need to take one step in the right direction, consistently, until the direction itself becomes natural. The doctors have been telling us this for years. Now you know why.